This is K-Man Crosstalk. Now, from Studio 2, here's Austin Harris and Jonathan Piercy.
And good morning, K-Man, and welcome back to K-Man Crosstalk's Government Friday discussion, where we continue on the topic, the economic significance of the national flag carrier, Cayman Airways. We have changed out two of our guests. We have in studios with us CEO of the national flag carrier, Mr. Fabian Worms, as well as the Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Paul Tibbets, have joined the panel discussion, and they have joined the Chairman of the Board, Mr. Philip Rankin, where we will get into the operational side of the aircraft, where we will start to take a look at the definitions of the word subsidy versus output payment and what they mean. We will talk a little bit about the operational side in terms of the operational air routes that the airline runs itself as its core business, and what it runs in terms of the strategic tourism plan for the government and the Department of Tourism itself. But we want to create an opportunity, as always, for some exchange between the listening audience and those in studios, and also create an opportunity so that we can understand and follow along. Again, because this morning's conversation is specific and topic related, we are also going to limit our calls from 3 minutes down to 2 minutes, so that we can receive the highest number of call variety, but still at the same time get across the point that we want to make today, and that is answering the question, what is the economic significance of the national flag carrier? With that, good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen. Jonathan and Austin, thank you so much for this morning's program. Excellent, and thank you for bringing it to the Cayman public. One of the things I'd like to do is to say to you that the only thing I wish had happened this morning was that this had actually been put on, on being filmed, so that it could have gone on the government station there, a television station, because there was so much information, so much vital information. Number one, which was shared by Mr. Norman Bodden, as well as the very fine outlay which Mr. Kokano gave us as well. I'm sure that the three fine gentlemen who have just joined you, and good morning to you, sir, I'm sure that theirs will be as interesting. I've always supported Cayman Airways. I've flown many airlines. I have not encountered any service which has given me greater satisfaction than that of Cayman Airways. I congratulate everyone who's involved. It is our airline, and I pray that we'll do everything we can to support it. Gentlemen, have a good day, and happy Father's Day to whom it applies.
Thank you very much, caller. We certainly do appreciate it, and I'm sure the guests in studios appreciate those very kind remarks. I just want to welcome to the conversation CEO, Mr. Fabian Worms, and Mr. Paul Tibbets, likewise. Good morning, and welcome to the discussion. If we can just hit the ground running, because time is at a premium for us. And when we look operationally, I think a good place to start is on what I have used the word, and others have used the word, subsidy. We will call output payments or equity injections, depending on what we're referring to. I think Jonathan laid out some of the budget numbers. 14.9 million for strategic air service, 2.8 million for strategic air service, particularly to the BRAC, and a $4.8 million equity injection to deal with things like historical debt. There is a distinct difference between what route that it focuses on as what is operationally important to the airline versus what is strategically important for the country. And the amounts that are budgeted for in the annual budget meet those varied needs. I wonder, Philip, perhaps maybe we can start with you, where we can talk about the difference between what is an operational importance for the airline as a business versus the strategic goals for the government, for the country, using Cayman Airways as a tool in the otherwise utility box available to the government. Chairman of the Board, Mr. Philip Rankin.
Austin, again, good morning to you and Jonathan, and I'd like to thank you again for having us on. Getting back to Mr. Norman, ever since he joined the board and saw what was happening, saw the good things that was going on with Cayman Airways, he always wanted us to go public. We were always, one of the things that we always found that we were not good at is getting out the message of all the good things that we were doing. So he insisted and continued to insist over the last year for us to really come out in the public and, just lay it all on the table. And that's why we're here.
Right.
Before I get into that subject regarding subsidy versus output, I want to just jump back to my involvement going back to 2009 when I was appointed as a director. Immediately after I was appointed as a director, because of my background as a CPA and my many years in financial services, we established a financial affairs subcommittee, which I was the chairman of, and continued that post until I believe it was in 2012. At that point in time, I was appointed chairman. One of the first things that we found, we had Jude Scott, who was another CPA and was an ex-partner of E&Y. We took the challenge to see what was Cayman Airways for. The money that was given to Cayman Airways by government, we need to have an understanding and define exactly where that money fit in within Cayman Airways operations. So we embarked on first defining what was all the areas of operation for Cayman Airways, and it wore three different hats. We created this chart, which is referred to as the airlift framework. That airlift framework is basically defined as the core. And we always use that scenario around the table that if we were the owners of Cayman Airways that sat around this table, the core would be what we fly for a profit. Then we had strategic domestic, which is our sister islands, and it's highly, highly crucial that we maintain that air bridge. I think sometimes people would ask why we fly to Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, but without Cayman Airways providing that air service, a dying economy in those islands would be dead. So we do have a moral obligation for our sister islands in order to maintain that. No other company is going to come in here and fly that. We're still going to have to pay them. So why not pay your own airline that employs your own people to provide that service? So that was the strategic. You had the core, strategic domestic, and finally the big numbers is the strategic tourism. Those are the flights to New York, Dallas, Washington, Chicago, and we fly that. And one of the things that we did was to actually create the synergies back and solidify those between Cayman Airways and DOT, because we found that they were not working hand in hand. And one of the first things that we did was to try to bring them back in hand and work with us. The money that's put in those, in particularly, which is the largest sum of money that's put in there, you'll hear from all the discussions later what the return is in terms of the country for that investment. I was also involved with putting the management team together, and I worked closely with these guys over the last 5 years. And needless to say, finance impacts every corner of that operations. And I'll just give you a little bit of what happened. When we inherited a budget, I think it was a 9-10 budget, which had already been approved. Jude and I, along with the rest of the team, looked at the revenue numbers to determine whether those figures were realistic. Well, what we found was that they were about $10.5 million unrealistic. So myself, as chair of the financial matters, along with Paul and the rest of his team, even the CEO, we embarked on a line-by-line item now, because we have $10.5 million that was projected that we're never going to realistically reach. So we had to find a way to mitigate that. And we embarked on a line-by-line item of expenditure, and were able to shed at least $12.75 million, if memory serves me, off of the operating costs of that airline in order to mitigate the difference in the revenue.
Right.
We took, things like we renegotiated leases to get lease reductions. Took staff complement down from about 412 down to about 350. Paul, is that right? I think it's around 350, 360. Didn't affect the operations. Actually, it made the operations even more efficient. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying all of that because it's important to understand where the airline over the last 5 years with this management team that takes, not me, I'm not going to include myself in that, although I kind of provide some direction. But these guys work very, very hard all hours of the night. And, it's very demeaning to hear, that there's bad management just because people don't understand what happens in the airlines and why the decisions are taken that's actually taken. But they have managed very well, and I can attest to that. Mm-hmm. When we get down now to the subject of subsidy versus output payments. Mm-hmm. One of the first things that Jude and I and the rest of the team did was that, we have to allocate those funds because there was just funds given to the airline, and in the past nobody knew how to apply those funds. So we all sat down and determined, okay, this what goes to tourism, this is what goes to support the sister island, this is what goes to the core because of certain flights within the core. That actually pertains to tourism as well. Mm-hmm. So that's how the funds were broken down. We got one last aspect of the airlift framework, which is surplus airlift. And anything that we do in surplus airlift, we have to do for profit. We won't do it unless it's for profit. Anything that the airline does have to fall within one of those 4 aspects. We don't look at it if it doesn't fall within that because now that's the mandate for the airlines. Mm. So in terms of the word that they use, subsidy, we have a purchase agreement from government. It's part of the budget. And that purchase agreement is really for us to provide air services to the sister islands. There's an amount allocated for that. Mm-hmm.
2.8 in this budget,
2.8, correct. Mm-hmm. And then there's funds allocated for strategic tourism.
14.9.
14.9. And, when you look at the overall picture of what Cayman Airways in terms of the GDP, it contributes about $200 million to the Cayman economy. And all of that is substantiated by independent reports that we had. We had one in 2005. Then we had that updated again by Deloitte in 2011. All of those reports are available. And there's no question. When you look at the report, you'll see that they coordinated some of the statistics and data from the ESO, Government's own Economic and Statistics Unit. Mm-hmm. So it's ironclad. Even without a multiplier effect, when you take when you look at some of the routes, we can calculate that in a particular month, in a particular time, exactly what the government's return is. And we do it monthly. Exactly what the government return is on any sums of money that they put in. And, if they put in $2 million, we can, for that particular period, we can categorically state that they get 10, 20 times return on that $2 million. Mm-hmm. So, and this is something, and I just want to interject this. The minister said it very well in a statement he made to the newspaper in a recent article, that we have to start thinking about, in that respect, about the New York and the Chicago and Washington flights, Dallas. We got to stop looking at Cayman Airways as a profit center. We got to look at the country as a profit center from a national strategic tourism interest, because the return. And I give you an example in New York, out of that same route. If we allocate $3 million out of that money annually to New York route, think about it this way. The airfare to New York should actually probably be $650, thereabouts. And if the airfare is now only $300, government pays that other $300 to get that New York tourist to Cayman. Because guess what? For that investment of $300, that particular tourist, one New York tourist, spends at least $5,000 to $6,000 a week. Now, if anybody can't see the merit in spending $300 to get $5,000 for the country, something is really wrong, because I can't break it down any smaller than that. So in terms of the subsidy versus output, there's a purchase agreement. So that indicates that, and you know, you always come up with this question about going concern. Government could take away that $14 million and we could take away those routes. But we could scale the operations down of Cayman Airways and fly our core. But guess what though? Now with that 365 employees that we have, we no longer have those employed, right? So the $20 million that we're paying out that they spend in this economy, they no longer have that to spend. So, you know, you can take it away in the left hand, but government going to have to find some way to help those people in the right hand. So for the 6 years, Cayman Airways have been embedded in this country. And anybody that thinks that Cayman Airways can just go away and you can strip that out of your GDP, they have another guest coming or really don't know anything about finances.
Well, thank you, Philip. I think there's some very valuable points. And again, that's where I wanted to talk to the CEO. We talk again about the subsidy, the output payment. The government has purchased a service to run New York, Washington, Chicago as part of their strategic tourism goals. We hear the saying all the time, why can't Cayman Airways be run like a business? Well, certainly that is where the core part of Cayman Airways routes come in. If the national flag carrier were to be run like a business and focus on its core routes, Miami, the Sister Islands, Kingston, Jamaica, those would be the only flights the airline would fly. But as Philip just pointed out, there's going to be a knock-on effect. Obviously, the size of the aircraft operation, the airline operation, will be reduced. The jobs, which, again, unemployment hovering at 10.5%. If we were to ask Cayman Airways to operate as a business, to focus only on those core routes and those core routes alone, significant number of persons would also currently be unemployed, and the economic multiplier effect in terms of the salaries they earn and the payments they make, just like we all do, groceries, rent, utilities, water, that's money that's spent on the island, creating economic activity and being spent by other persons. That would go away. And of course, unemployment would increase. I want to talk specifically, though, at those purchase agreements. In other words, the flights that the government pays the airline in order to fly for their strategic plan. If I understand it correctly, and Fabian, I want to begin with you here. The government is covering the costs of the airline to fly to these strategic routes. Is that an accurate statement?
Good morning, Austin and Jonathan and the listening public, and a special good morning to the Cayman Airways family, who I know are all listening as well. The government, I wouldn't say they cover the cost 100%, but as Mr. Philip mentioned, if the cost to bring that tourist from New York, if the airfare correctly should be $650 as an example, and what we're charging is $300, it means we're foregoing that revenue that's necessary to fully cover all our fully allocated costs. So it is that top-up that is necessary to allow the service to happen at that fare. That is what the purchase or the output payments from the government goes towards.
All right. So if we are covering that top-up, if you will, and, again, we are flying into these different gateways as a means of opening up Cayman's otherwise wider tourism market, gaining access to the spend, for example, of a New York customer. And obviously, Philip just gave the numbers. Again, we don't need to, do the math, but I think it's obvious. But my question is, when we look at some of those routes that the national airline flies on behalf of the government, whilst the costs are being covered through the output payment to a certain extent, we still have flights that are going to some of these locations half empty. And the question is, what is the national airline doing to maximize the return that could be generated from those specific routes that the government is largely paying you to fly? It's an opportunity, I see, to fill those flights, and there's no reason to fill those seats. And if the ticket price should be $600, but Cayman Airways is charging $300, that to me tells me as a consumer, there's even more reason why those flights to those gateways should in fact be full. And I wonder what the airline is doing operationally to maximize the returns on these routes that we acknowledge the airline wouldn't run if they were running their own operational plan. But because we understand the significance to GDP and the economy and the tourism, it does run, but government pays for it. How is the airline maximizing the potential returns on investment on those routes specifically?
I'm going to ask Paul Tibbetts, our VP of Commercial Affairs and Finance, to actually address that one, because he'll do a better job than I can. But one thing I'll say to you is that there is a lot of seasonality in our loads. And I'm happy to say that for the current winter season, our forward bookings are looking excellent. And for the summer, we're not really experiencing any low loads on the flights that you're speaking about, the strategic tourism flights. So Paul can elaborate a little bit more on that.
All right. And obviously the reason I asked Paul, and thank you for joining the conversation, is people will ask, well, okay, so these subsidies or output payments, the government's paying for something. What can the airline do to reduce those output payments? And one of the ways they can reduce it is by maximizing the additional profit they make in addition to the output payment that the government provides. But talk to us about those routes, the remarkable price points to get on those routes, but still the reality that we're flying some of these routes half empty.
Sure. Good morning, Austin. Good morning, Jonathan.
Morning.
When it comes to the routes, particularly New York and Chicago, which are two of our key tourism routes that we provide as a service to government, those two routes, believe it or not, actually perform with quite heavy load factors. New York, in particular, runs on a regular basis always our number one or number two flight in terms of load factor. So that route does quite well for us. One of the factors you have to keep in mind when we're looking at flights that we provide as a service to government is we're not always about just having a flight there to have a flight there. There's always a reason for it. So we put flights in at specific times. We put flights into markets that may not necessarily have a sufficient demand right now to justify service, but we're there to help build the service. We're there to make sure that over time that market is developed. So take a look at Houston, for example, where years ago Cayman Airways flew Houston on a very regular basis. It eventually got to the point where the market could be sustained by another carrier, and Continental, now United, came in and started doing the route. So then Cayman Airways took a step back with government and said, okay, what else can we do with that asset? Now, if Houston is being served adequately, where else can we put that market? So now we're flying into Dallas to try to build a market there that over time may be able to be handed off to another carrier. If not, Cayman Airways will be there to provide that service, because from a tourism standpoint, government is buying that service that we are providing. So it's not always about making sure that full loads are on there every single flight. What we're looking at doing is making sure that the service is there so tourists have an easy way, the minister mentioned that earlier, an easy way to get to Cayman, and that helps in their decision-making process.
Yes, I understand that. But again, though, my layman's mind says if somebody is paying for my costs to do this, but I see as a business that I've got empty seats, that tells me that I'm losing an opportunity to create revenue. And I think the question has to be asked again, is there any motivation on behalf of the operational line of Cayman Airways to say, okay, this route we wouldn't fly if we were running this thing like a business, but we accept it is part of a larger plan and the government is paying us to run these flights. Isn't it in the airline's best interest, therefore, to make every effort to fill every seat, even on the basis, especially on the basis that we know those airfares for those flights are greatly discounted and no other carrier can compete with that price point because the airline is the national airline? Philip?
Austin, you're absolutely correct, and I think Paul will tell you that I've been pushing, actually, in regards to, and I always state in our meetings that we have an operational advantage because of the fact that government supports that route. We can get real aggressive. If we see that flight is not booking up to where we would like it to be, we get real aggressive sometimes if it's necessary to fill that flight. Because, again, going back to what I stated, it's not the Cayman Airways profit center, it's the country's profit center. Mm-hmm. So if we give that seat away for $100 for somebody coming from Dallas to get to Cayman, we know that we're going to gain from their spend in the country. Mm-hmm. So the key is to try to fill those flights. But like Dallas, we've only been in there a short time. New York, on the other hand, New York flights has been running really heavy. And we also had someone in New York, what was the name? The gentleman that we had in New York promoting our flight in New York to get more passengers on our flight. Mm-hmm. So those efforts are ongoing. We're not really trying to
take away market share.
Right. Matter of fact, by us being as aggressive as we are in the New York market, even with JetBlue coming on, we were still moving more passengers than JetBlue. Mm-hmm. And if you ask, the reason being, they love the Cayman Airways service. Mm-hmm. I had a partner in one of my firms in New York, Anjan, he's a financial services partner. He came to a conference last year, and he loved our service so much. He could have gotten a direct flight. He could have gotten a flight on American. The only reason what happened, our flights are more leisure, not really conducive to the business traveler. Mm-hmm. And he actually flew from New York on Cayman Airways flight. And then from after the conference, he flew to Miami on Cayman Airways flight as opposed to using America.
Very good.
And that's a testament. And he was raving about our service.
Sure.
And if we had flights that were conducive, he would never have used American.
Right.
Honestly.
I have someone that sent in a text, says that they have two questions for the guests. It says, why is the Jamaica route so ridiculously expensive for such a short route? They believe that it is actually cheaper to fly to New York. And then the other question is in relation to taxes. It says, also, does the taxes charged on every ticket go back to government? They've heard that some of those taxes don't go back to government.
I'll take that one. Specifically with the airfares to Jamaica, the discussion we had earlier where we spoke about our core routes and we spoke about our strategic tourism routes and we spoke about how the government's funding is used to support strategic tourism. It just so happens that Jamaica is one of our core routes. It's simply not a strategic tourism source market for the Cayman Islands.
Okay.
So the airfare that's being charged on the Jamaica route is actually the correct fare that anyone would charge if they're running a business in a business-like manner without any government assistance.
Gotcha. Right.
It's also the same with Honduras, as it is with Havana, as it is with most of Miami. Those routes are not tourist routes per se. And what you'll find is that there's a lot of similarity between the fares on all of those routes. The Jamaican fares, however, it's a funny situation because that fare is subject to a degree of taxes, which is one of the things the text message is asking about. The taxes to Jamaica is about 60 US more than the taxes to the States, for instance. And that is because the Jamaican government alone, their taxes totals about 100 US.
Okay.
Right? So, when you look at the overall price that you pay, you might be paying $400 for your ticket. 160 of it is taxes, right? And 240 comes to Cayman Airways. Whatever we charge as taxes and fees, for the most part, it absolutely goes back to some government agency. Okay. That money is not ours.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. We've been reading the papers recently. There have been a few buzz comments here and there about perhaps safety concerns, whether it be parts of the aircraft found on the runways or elsewhere. And I think we have created a mountain out of a rather small and insignificant molehill. But again, we want to allow our guests in studios to address those concerns.
All right, gentlemen, there was an article recently talking about some parts that had supposedly fallen off of the jet. That created a certain amount of concern, let's just say, in the community. Could sort of take this opportunity to sort of give the facts in terms of what that was all about. And secondly, I know that one of the criticisms that Cayman Airways receives quite a bit is that the planes that you're flying are dated. And usually what people do is they look at the date that a particular aircraft came off the assembly line, and they don't look at maybe what the industry standard is for determining the age of a flight and whether or not it's old, quote unquote. So if you could speak part one to that story, shed some light on what it is, and then the second part is to speak a little bit about what you guys do in industry to determine whether or not a plane is in good shape and is fit for flight.
I was actually quite surprised when I heard on the radio the issue of parts falling off the aircraft being brought up. I really had to jog my memory because there really is nothing immediate in that regard that has happened at Cayman Airways. But 2 years ago, we did have a situation where a pin was found on the runway by the airport staff doing their runway inspections. That's a normal safety check that's done periodically throughout the day. And the Cayman Islands Airport Authority circulated pictures of this pin.
A pin.
And asked all the operators to see if they could identify it. Is this from one of your aircraft? As it happened, we realized that this pin came from one of our brake units. And it was actually a part that would not affect the functioning of the brake unit any at all. When we looked into the details of the matter, we realized that it was an industry-wide problem with that particular type of brake unit and the parts that were being used to overhaul the brake unit. There were some batches of clips that were failing prematurely, so they would fail before the brake itself would wear out, and it would cause this pin to liberate. Now, the pin has a lot to do with indicating the wear on the brake. It's more of an indicator type issue. It's not a functional part of the brake unit. The biggest problem with that actually was the debris being on the runway and the damage that could pose to another aircraft. But it was not something that affected the functioning of our aircraft. And again, this is something that's 2 years old. And over a 6-month period, of course, we had to demonstrate to the Civil Aviation Authority of the Cayman Islands, who keeps a watchful eye over all of our activities, that we had put in place a program to ensure that all the pins got replaced and we had no more recurrences over 6 months. So once we identified the problem, within a matter of days, we had replaced the defective clips. It was a very simple job, actually, just to replace some defective clips, which would then prevent these pins from falling off the brakes. I think that issue, however, was brought up in the context that our aircraft are old and parts are falling off them. Well, one thing I'd like to say in this particular instance, those brakes are also used on much newer aircraft. And that problem also exists on much newer aircraft.
Yes.
So it really has no bearing on the age of the aircraft. It's not something that should be used for those purposes to try and illustrate that because the aircraft are old, parts are falling off it. Nothing could be further from the truth.
But let's also talk about the things like C-checks and whatnot, where engines are rebuilt. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the age of the aircraft itself. Talk to us about that.
Exactly. When an aircraft is delivered new, there is a honeymoon period. And that honeymoon period may be up to 5 years. In other words, you'll get 5 years of engine usage. The engines are the major components. They're the most expensive to maintain. Once they come off, they're overhauled. What many operators do is they're in an overhaul pool. So the engine that comes off their aircraft may not even be the engine that goes back on. And the engine that goes on may be an engine that has been on an aircraft and overhauled 3 times already. So again, do you then look at the age when that engine was manufactured and say it's an old engine? Or do you look at the fact that it's been completely refreshed and restored and overhauled recently? And that is what aviation is all about. The vast majority of parts on an aircraft are continuously being refreshed and replaced and overhauled and restored. So the issue of age really is not that large an issue. If that were the case, there's no way the regulatory authorities would allow people to fly aircraft that are in excess of 30 or 40 or even 50 years old. We have aircraft that are flying around that are very, very old. Now, when it comes to when the aircraft was manufactured versus how much flying the aircraft has done, the more important factor actually is how many flights has that aircraft flown. And what I'd like to say is the 4 jets that Cayman Airways operates, they are gems. They're probably the 4 best 737-300s that exist as far as I'm concerned. They were handpicked. They were picked one by one. Each one had to match the previous one's configuration in all respects. They actually work perfect for Cayman Airways. Now they will break. They have what's known as a level of technical dispatch reliability, which is about 98%, which means 98% of the time you put that aircraft to the gate, it's going to perform. 2% of the time, you're going to have a mechanical problem. Now, a brand new aircraft will deliver you 99% technical dispatch reliability. The age aircraft we have will deliver 98, right? 1% difference. Now, let me put that into perspective. If we do 6,000 flights a year with those jets, which is actually what we do, if we have 1% of our flights that are not going to perform in terms of we'll have a mechanical issue, then it means we'll have 600 such events. It's perfectly normal, perfectly standard. We cannot expect 100%. This is what we're going to get, 600 events. There are 60 events. There are 52 weeks in a year. So it's going to average 1 and a little bit per week. With the aircraft we have, what we can expect is 2 and a little bit per week. Now, if the aircraft doesn't perform 2% of the time, does that mean only 2 flights are affected? No. There's a chain event. There's a sequence that follows. If our first flight to Miami is affected by a mechanical interruption, and let's say it poses a 1 or a 2 hour delay, it affects the flight coming back from Miami. In theory, it should not affect our flight going to Cuba if we have another aircraft that can do that, which is usually the case. But we have passengers that are now coming from Miami to go on to Cuba. So we have to wait on them. So that poses that delay as well. And then when the flight goes to Cuba and it comes back, we have passengers that were connecting to Miami. So that 2 hour delay in the morning translates into 6 flights being delayed, and our operation ending 2 hours later than normal. Or it could be 3 or 4 hours, depending on the nature of the delay. What we absolutely do not do at Cayman Airways is we do not succumb to time pressure. We do not give in to time pressure. Whatever time we need to address issues to ensure that we dispatch that aircraft safely, that is what we do. Yes. That is what is expected. That is our moral obligation. There is just no other choice.
Yes.
One of the things that I'm having a lot of difficulty these days with is the almost mischievous sort of criticisms that are being thrown at Cayman Airways. When someone goes back 2 years in history to talk about parts falling off an aircraft, takes it out of context and creates an issue to the point where I think, Austin, you even had to go to the Civil Aviation Authority to check this out.
Yes, I did.
You know, we end up with a lot of these queries as well. And we spend an inordinate amount of time trying to answer questions, right? Whether it be to the government or whichever party is concerned, which it's just mischievous stuff and it's time consuming. Cayman Airways is not about that. If the Cayman Islands, if the people of the Cayman Islands feel that they have a vested interest in Cayman Airways, they should not want to be seen us spending our efforts dealing with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Let me just give one example of something. Last Friday, we pushed back an aircraft to dispatch it to Miami. The engines are not started until the aircraft is pushed back away from the gate. When the captain attempted to start one of the engines, it would not start. So the aircraft was brought back in. Now, this is a very, very common, simple issue. Not a huge deal. Nothing for anybody to be worried about. There's a way to manually open the start valve on that engine. When that system was tried at the gate, that didn't work as well. So that told the engineer who was working that aircraft, I now have to troubleshoot this problem. It's going to take a little bit of time. So it could be half an hour, it could be an hour, it could be 2, but likely it could be 3 or 4, because if we need to replace a starter to open the engine and do everything that's necessary, you could be looking at 3 or 4 hours out of service, and we have a fully loaded plane with passengers. So what do? We have a serviceable aircraft sitting right beside that aircraft. The call is made to move those passengers from one plane to the next. Within 1 hour, all the bags are offloaded. All the passengers are transferred. The crew come off. They re-prep, reorient, go through all their checklists to get the next aircraft ready for dispatch. We end up leaving with a 1 hour delay, and I am proud of the Cayman Airways staff for pulling that off. Sure. It's a good thing. Yes. Our customers should be happy that we had a problem with an aircraft and they were only inconvenienced by 1 hour. If this was any other airline, they'd be sitting there for 3, 4, 5 hours sitting on the airplane, maybe without water, without food, right? I'm very proud. But what does that become? Someone makes mischief of it, right? And we read in Tuesday's newspaper, Cayman Airways plane grounded for faulty starter, right? These things don't sound good. And the newspaper in particular, it ends up being on the internet. So the next visitor who says, let me think about coming to the Cayman Islands, and they Google the Cayman Islands, and of course they're going to see Cayman Airways, and they say, oh, let me check out this Cayman Airways. So now when they Google Cayman Airways, this is the type of stuff that they're reading. Yeah. So I'm urging people, if you have a genuine, good, real criticism about Cayman Airways, please bring it to us. But let's cut out the mischief and the pointless banter which serves no useful purpose. It's very distracting. It takes away a lot from us making progress.
The conversation continues online. Your comments matter. Find all the links you need for Cayman Crosstalk at rooster101.ky. More of The Only Morning Show That Matters, next.